The sea meets the land, the results can be devastating. All these people's jobs and homes are under threat. This road was built for a village that simply isn't here anymore. So what's going on? We're going to travel down the northeast coast between Flamborough Head and Spurn Point to see how this coastline's changing. This coastline was not always where it is today. 100,000 years ago, there was a shallow bay here. An ice sheet covered northern Europe and was expanding across the North Sea. The ice was wearing away at the seabed, lifting up large boulders, stones, sand and clay as it moved. Finally, the ice sheet stopped growing and started melting. As it retreated, it left behind a thick, soft blanket of the mud, stone and sand it had been carrying. This is called boulder clay. The ice melted and the sea rose again. Settlers soon started to farm this new expanse of soft boulder clay. But over the years, more than 30 villages have disappeared. This is Europe's fastest eroding coastline. Here at Flamborough Head, the sea meets hard chalk deposits. Cliffs up to 30 metres high have been cut by the waves. How can waves form cliffs? Where the waves hit the base of the cliff, they make a notch undercutting it. The weight of the overhanging chalk pulls it crashing to the beach. Each time this happens, a new cliff face is formed further inland. So these cliffs have been formed by a series of these relatively small notches, like this. The seawater and rain can force their way into small cracks and fissures. Small faults can turn into large caves. This used to be a cave in the side of a headland. The sea is worn all the way through to make an arch. As erosion continues, the roof will fall away too, leaving a stack standing alone out to sea. Further south, the hard white chalk dips down under the soft brown boulder clay, which was left by the ice sheet. Because these cliffs are softer, erosion here is faster. Sometimes there's hardly time to form a notch before the whole cliff slumps down. Meters of land can be lost every year. This really matters when people live close to the edge. Mr. Cross lives in the seaside village of Barmston.
We purchased this property some 11 years ago, in the full knowledge that sooner or later it would drop into the sea. At that time we were something like 40, 50 yards from the cliff edge, and now we're more like 20. I understand that there's something like 30 houses running parallel to the cliff top right down the coast there, which have all disappeared into the sea utterly and completely.
These water pipes and electricity cables used to be connected to houses that were swallowed by the sea.
It is horrific. I think it's all to do with the type of material of which the cliffs are composed.
When the boulder clay is eroded by waves, tiny clay particles are taken up by the water and float in a fine suspension. You can see this thick brown water along the shoreline. Larger sand particles and stones from the eroding boulder clay are carried southwards along the beach by wind and waves. Along the coast at Mappleton, the local council have built rock walls called groins. These stick out to sea and catch the drifting particles, building up this protective beach in front of the town. This keeps the waves from attacking the cliffs at Mappleton, but has effects further south. Sue Earle runs a farm a kilometre away.
They put a rock groin, which is a rock barrier going out to sea, made of rocks from Norway. And this has stopped the sediment coming down to our land and protected the bottom of our cliff. So we did have an erosion rate of 3 feet a year, and now we get 30 feet a year. And if you go to the bottom of the cliff, you can see big boulders of clay, and there is no sand on the beach. So every tide, when the tide comes in, it's hitting the bottom of the cliff and eroding the clay away. In the wintertime, the house shakes when the sea hits the bottom of the cliff. This is basically a livestock, animal farm. All our cows are Friesians, and unfortunately they're very inquisitive. If the earth is unstable, and they can fall down the cliff. We have chickens, we have 8 cats and 3 dogs. Also, we have 3 Shetland ponies.
But the dairy has got to be demolished before it also falls into the sea.
All the cows will have to be sold this next year because we cannot afford to build a new dairy. In front of the house and the dairy, there was fields where the cows used to graze and crops could be grown, but that is now all gone.
In 35 years, the sea has eaten over 60 metres inland.
When they do protect an area, it does cause problems in other areas and increase the erosion for somebody else.
Further down the coast is the seaside resort of Withersea. These old sea defences are worn out. The force of the waves shakes the houses behind. The local council are investing in new sea defences to protect the town from this destructive energy. Harry is the site manager in charge of building a new sea wall.
This is where we're going to put the base, and this is the actual wall. Then we project the wall up into a splashback. So when the waves hit the wall, it splashes and throws the water back into the sea.
This design doesn't just stop the waves, it deflects their energy harmlessly out to sea. Hundreds of these sections are being cast in reinforced concrete, making a solid wall along the seafront. Outside this wall, they're adding a second sea defence that's come all the way from Norway on this gigantic barge. These are hard granite boulders weighing 10 tons each. They're going to be piled up in front of the seawall. Because they can move a bit as the waves hit them, they absorb some of the sea's energy before it reaches the wall. These new sea defences stretch over a kilometre along Withersea Beach. Erosion is a problem for big business too. Out in the North Sea, Drilling platforms bring up gas from the rocks 2 miles below. This gas is pumped 18 miles back to dry land to the British gas terminal at Easington. Here they purify it, ready for use in factories and for cooking and heating at home. At its busiest, a quarter of all Britain's gas comes through this site. It's here because this land is the closest to the offshore gas fields. This is where all the different processes are controlled. They even give the gas a smell for safety. They thought North Sea gas would last 25 years, so they built this terminal far enough away from the soft clay cliffs to last that long. But the gas is still flowing. Now the sea is only 12 metres from the fence. Jim, an engineer at the terminal, is worried about how quickly the cliff is eroding. They're making plans for their own sea defences. They'd like to make a wall of rocks along the base of the cliffs, like those at Withernsea. Flamborough, Barmston, Mappleton, Cowden Farm, Withernsea and Easington Gas Terminal are all along this eroding coastline. And just south is Spurn Point. Spurn Point is a long narrow spit of sand and shingle. Depending on the direction of the wind and waves, material is deposited here or washed away. Last century, groins were built to protect the spit. Without them, Spurn might have been washed into the sea years ago. Behind the spit is a nature reserve, sheltered from the North Sea waves. Barry Spence monitors the wildlife in the mudflats.
When birds are on migration, that's when they're going from the summer quarters to the winter quarters or vice versa. They need somewhere to stop and rest up and feed. The mudflats themselves obviously provide that area for that type of bird that feeds there, like the wading birds, ducks, geese, etc. Bushes and fields provide an area for them to feed up, I'll say when they're either moving north or south. So lots of rare plants and rare insects actually occurring here. There are lots of special birds occur here on migration as well. Thousands of years ago, it didn't exist, of course. It's only since the Ice Age that it's existed. I mean, the natural coastline before the Ice Age was Hull, where the chalk begins. The sea is claiming back what it had in the first place. It's just eroding the Ice Age clays away back to the original coastline.
At the end of the spit is Spurn Point itself. This is a base for the lifeboat and Humber pilot services. From here, navigators travel to and from ships to guide them through the dangerous Humber estuary with its narrow channels and shifting mudbanks.
At an average day, a slow day, we do about 80 ships with pilots on board. Ferry boats, coasters, fishing boats, barges, pleasure craft.
Speaking. Yes, good evening, Mr. Ford. What time are you going to be off Albert Dock, please?
Yeah, it should fit in.
You can get down for 6 o'clock, we'll have a launch there for you.
At low water, all this light blue will be shown as mud when you look outside. This is shallow water, or shallowish water, and then this gets to be deep water, and the black is the very deep water. The erosion comes down the coast. At any one time, at high water, there's about 3 million tonnes of silt suspended. Consequently, next day there's a new sandbank or a new mud pile. It's very nice to come down for the day, jump on the bus or the motor car, But to actually live here, you've got to be a special breed.
And a special breed they are. Spurn Point is base for the lifeboat service too. From here they carry out rescue operations along the coast and in the busy estuary itself. It's the only full-time lifeboat in Britain. Dave Steen Voorden is a member of the crew.
The Humber being one of the busiest shipping estuaries in the country now, with 100 shipping movements a day. So the lifeboat is absolutely perfectly situated. It's like having all the emergency services in the middle of the M1. We average one call out a week, and over the last 2 days we've had 4, for a total of about 30 hours for all 4. So we're all a little bit tired at the moment.
Dave lives right on the tip of Spurn, in a small village built especially for lifeboat families. He lives with his wife Karen and their 2 boys, Carl and Scott.
For the actual nature of how we live, I would think it's the same as living in a goldfish bowl. You work with the same people, you live with the same people, but it's got more advantages than disadvantages. There's always a babysitter, there's always somebody to go for a cup of tea, and it's like a big family.
We run a little tea shop. We actually bought it off one of the other crew that retired a couple of years ago. We've kept it going purely for, you know, the bird watchers and tourists that come down here, because I think at the end of the 3.5 miles when they get here, they need a cup of tea.
The best thing's the peace and quiet, and the bad thing's about when all your friends are going out to the swimming pool and all that, and you can't go with them.
Just this thin spit of land connects them to the mainland.
There was one time when the sea just washed the road away and took all the sand away, so it undermined and just went. And the bus couldn't come and pick us up, so we had to stay at home till the road was repaired. The road was like on a slant, and then one wave, and then when that wave went, there was no road, it was just beach.
You know, we don't really know what's going to happen if there is a major breach. They'll probably move the wives and kids off the point. And I think eventually it will become an island. And I say, you know, they really ought to think about doing something. You know, there's 7 families down here and the pilots and that, you know, people tend to forget us down this end.
From north to south, erosion is affecting local people, farmers, seaside towns, industry, wildlife, and essential services. Even though families may lose their homes, Spurn Point is to be left to the action of the sea.
The story. You remind me of